All right, Mario, this is quite a treat. I've followed you for some time. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat about sales with you. Um, one thing that we'd be remiss not to point out, specifically being in sales as long as we have collectively, sales is changing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of elements, a lot of parameters and variables that are shifting. How do you recommend sellers today approach that?
So that's a great topic, and thanks for having me on and talking with me. I love this, and I love your book. So this is kind of an honor for me too to be here. So thanks, Carson. Great.
You.
But sales is definitely changing. While being a consultative salesperson is still kind of key, that drives all other kind of behaviors and type of methods and processes. But I think one thing that's really changing is it's not solution. It's not as much solution based as it is results based. And some people think that's the same thing, but in my mind, that's very, very different. Is a solution is 50% product, 50% how you solve the product. And now it's almost the results based is it doesn't matter what the process is. It doesn't matter what the tool is, as long as the end result is the right way. And how can you show me that that end result is going to be there rather than just good marketing and smoke and mirrors? And so being a salesperson that can convey results rather than just solutions, I think is one of the aspects that's changing definitely and especially with technology and AI and lots of things getting automated. Selling solutions is easy, and that's not what people are looking for anymore. They're looking for results, and everybody always looked for results, but the focus has been more the salesperson was trying to be in control, and now it's the less control you have, the more authentic you have to be, and the more you have to be able to partner rather than just kind of control a sales process.
That's very powerful. There's a lot to unpack there, and I like how you focused on the shift. And I liken it to doctors. And obviously there are methods that have worked for many, many years and probably still do or would today. But if you don't learn the new technology or the new ways to become do procedures, become proficient, you can become obsolete. And I think that you hit on something that's very key here. And it's also part of the buyer's journey. You read the statistics, buyers are 56, 57% down the path before they even engage a seller. And so they've done their research. The research is at their disposal. They can go out and figure out almost anything that they need. So their need of a seller is a lot different than it was before. They expect and they command results. And so to be able to articulate a story, to be able to show use cases of how or why your product is better matters a heck of a lot more than it ever did
Oh yeah.
because there are tangible results. Things can be researched very easily. So what do you think if you were talking to sellers today, which I know you do, what do you tell them about how they can adapt and be a chameleon in this changing sales environment?
No, that's a great question. There's so many things that go into it, but I think one of the biggest aspects that we don't that gets overlooked is learning how to teach. Because most of the biggest sales and the enterprise and the largest deals are you're not going to actually sell to the final decision maker. Whoever your contact is and your biggest supporter, they're going to be the ones probably selling it internally long before you get a chance to talk to the decision maker. And so if you can teach them how to sell your product, then you have a much better chance of getting that final meeting. And so if you can learn how to teach and teach in a way that other people can take it and run with it, then you'll be much better set apart for success than people who can't teach very well.
That is so important to point out, and I think far too often there's a lot of elements of sales that you cannot control. It's important to control all the variables that you can, but there's an element of a lot of times we rely on people in an organization that we want to be a client to sell to their leadership, and we do a poor job of arming them with what they need. And it's a controllable that we overlook sometimes as sellers, because at the end of the day, look, there's final decision makers, but there's a lot of what I like to call influencers of influencers, where you need them in the boat with you. You need to make sure that there's a symbiotic relationship there. Sometimes some of the best relationships that I've had in organizations have been just that. Those folks that, maybe I'm about to send a big proposal, and I have somebody that I can vet that proposal with in the organization. But you've got to, it works both ways. You've got to make sure that not only are you getting feedback from them, but that you're guiding them and showing them exactly the why behind everything. And it's a transparent sales process. What you got to do is look for a win for these people, everybody that you interact with. You know, I may historically talk a lot with IT. Let's throw that out there. But obviously you need relationships in the business as well. But you can't overlook IT. You can't move away from them. You've got to figure out how do I empower them? How do I figure out what looks like a win to them in this whole process and deliver that win in everything that you do? That's what's going to get these folks in the boat with you. And I love how you talked about learning how to teach. Can you throw out maybe an experience from your wealth of knowledge, your career, something that speaks directly to how you've shifted and pivoted in your sales approach, maybe around learning how to teach, because that really intrigues me, but would love to hear something, maybe a key learning that you had and how it's modified your sales approach.
Yeah, for sure. So this transition kind of happened maybe 4 years ago. So I'd already been selling for a while. So I started my sales career full time in 2006. When I left college, I started selling. But one of the things I always used to do was sell based on the words that they wanted to hear and the terminology they use, which is important, right? You have to use their internal lingo and their words. But by saying and repeating their words back to them, they were only understanding it on the level they already knew. They didn't learn anything new and they didn't understand anything new. And I kind of went back to then the time as when I was a missionary in Hong Kong, where in order to teach people, we would teach them with stories and analogies that really had nothing to do with what we were talking about, but they could make the connection, and then we could say, and that's like, and then we could then make that transition. And so then about 4 years ago, I started doing that. We're saying, hey, when you're explaining this idea, so let's say inventory management, and you have a tool that has a front end and a back end. And so you can say, everybody thinks that the most important part of the tool is the front end or the outside of a building. But what's really important in a building is the foundation. If you don't have a good foundation, nothing on the outside is going to stay up. It's not going to work, right? And so that little example of just saying, comparing it to something that's nothing to do with it, helps them understand and then helps them explain it to their boss so they can say, hey, yeah, we need to focus on this, but we also need to focus on this, and here's why. Rather than just using their terminology, we actually have to change it so they can understand. I think using analogies has really helped. And there's some analogies don't work and they fall flat, but that's why you just have to keep trying and keep learning how to use them.
I love that, because everybody you talk to, they know their business proficiently. You know your business proficiently, but you're speaking different languages to one another. We've got to simplify it. Analogies are great, but it's okay to acknowledge that some sales ways might be outdated or need to be refreshed or updated. So I love how you took something that worked very well before. I can relate to that. I started out in phone sales around a little bit earlier than you did. I'm not going to date myself too much, but started out in phone sales. And you're right. I mean, a lot of it was saying what you knew they wanted to hear in order to guide them down a certain path. But I'm sorry, in long-term sales cycle, relationship selling, that doesn't work. It's all about the relationship and making sure that you're arming them with success, because nobody wants to look bad. Nobody wants to stake their career on a decision that's not going to pan out well. And so you've got to think about the holistic view of that relationship. So I agree. It's time to look at some of these older ways of selling and update them or make a tweak. Now, the other thing too, I'm very big on people and process. And so for me, process doesn't need to be overhauled. And I think that's what a lot of times people may think like, oh man, I need to change everything about my approach. Not so. You might just need to make some small tweaks in order to really have a dramatic impact on your selling and on your results. And I think that's really what it's all about. Mario, you talk to a lot of sellers, and I'd be interested, what's at the pulse of sellers today? What do you think sellers today need to hear?
So there's kind of two sides of the story, right? There's sellers that are really excited about the future and really anxious and really motivated to keep going and work hard and do well because they've seen success. And then there's other people that I'm talking to. It's almost like a 50-50 split, it feels like to me, where they're worried that their companies are changing their compensation plan. And so then they're not in control of how much they're going to get paid next year when they had a good year this year. Or they're worried that the market's changing and so their product's going to be outdated and then they're going to have to switch companies and learn a new product. So it's almost like there's a mindset of hope versus fear, and it doesn't really matter what the product or industry is. It seems like it's split down the middle between sellers that are hopeful and sellers that are kind of fearful. And so I really believe, and this is kind of maybe frou-frou or out there or Wonderland type stuff, but how you approach what you're facing will kind of determine the actions you take. And so if you take the right action, then you will in general have right results. And so a lot of the time, if you act with a mindset of protection and fear, you're not going to accomplish your potential. And so I think in the sales profession today, the world's changing and it's changing, and you're not going to be doing as much face-to-face stuff. Even going forward, you might, instead of having 10 face-to-face meetings, half of them will be face-to-face, half will be Zoom, right? So everything's changing, and you just have to not see it as a bad thing, but find a way, how can I embrace this change and then make my life and my career and my clients' lives better for it? And I think just the idea of hope is a real big issue, but then that hope has to be packaged under something. There has to be a foundation, right? And so where do you go to learn how to do it the right way? Who do you talk to? Who do you get information from? Because you can't just base it off your own experience, because nobody's actually experienced it fully. So you have to take it from a lot of different sources and a lot of information.
Amazing. Look, sellers, we're always going to be needed. And if you're good at these fundamentals, you can transcend that and parlay that anywhere you go.
Yeah.
Using an analogy, I liken it to being an athlete, and even just going into a different stadium or a different gym or a different ball field, understanding all of the lay of the land. They all look different, right? I've been in telecommunications, I've been in advertising, I've been in IT solutions, I've been in healthcare. Every bit of it all comes down to the fundamentals. You focus on relationships and you focus on the resources that you have at your disposal, and you make what you can out of that. And so I loved how you said, because I agree with you wholeheartedly, I think there's a lot of hope, but there's a lot of uncertainty. Yeah. And if you want to go the long course in sales, you have to reach a point where you have some comfort in discomfort. You have some ability to persevere through ambiguous situations. And I think what's critical about selling is being able to acknowledge that, just like an athlete, maybe you're traded to a new ball club, and you've got to understand, like, where are the little nooks and crannies of the baseball field? It isn't always about hitting the home run. Sometimes I've got to hit that bloop single over the first baseman's head to score my runner. And that's how you win in sales, is understanding the full element of the playing field. Sales excellence is not about excellent sales and big sales. A lot of people can land a whale. A lot of people can have good results for a month, a quarter, a year. But what gets you set up for the long haul of success is finding that way where you can uncover, like, what's my unique superpower? How can I have it benefit the most people possible? Whether it's customers, colleagues, get people in the boat with you, and really double down on resources and relationships. And if you do those things, you can be successful anywhere you go. There is a lot of uncertainty. When I was at AT&T years ago, I was always plotting my course, like, oh yeah, I want to be a sales manager by this time, and I want to be a director by this time. And I achieved those things, and it was great. But several years ago, coming to Microsoft, it was totally different. I mean, the roles that I have had over the years didn't even exist when I started here 7.5 years ago. And I think for some that's scary. For some, it's very exciting. And I think the quicker you can look at the possibility and enjoy the ride, that's where the real fun is. The best thing about selling is the relationships and the people that you get to meet along the way. I'd love to know from you, Mareo, like, I have a lot of respect for your sales acumen, the ways that you engage sellers. What's been a favorite experience? If you were talking to some sellers early on in career, what would you be telling them to do or to look out for throughout their career?
So that's a great question. But I think for me, staying in touch with the people you help is super important. And most salespeople I talk to don't do that. Once they close a deal, unless they're part of the account management team long term, or they're part of the renewal process, they actually don't talk to their partners or their closed clients ever again. They pass them off. And I think what's helped me stay motivated and stay on the course is, after I sell someone, every year or so you check in with them, see how they're doing, and that keeps that relationship going. Even if you never sell them anything ever again, but hearing their stories and seeing what you did for them, help them, continues to motivate you and inspire you to help other people. And that's super important. And I really like that you talk about the fundamentals, because the fundamentals don't change. How they're applied might change. And that's actually part of the reason I wrote my book, is because this is more anecdotal, but 90% of all salespeople never read a book. Of all the salespeople I've met, about 90% have never read a book since they left college or high school, wherever their last education was. And that's not necessarily a good thing, right? That's pretty bad. And so I wanted to create what I would call a gateway book, right? Like a gateway, almost like a gateway drug, where it's not hard to read. It's easy to find your way around it. It's easy to remember the information. It has lots of the fundamentals. It's something you can apply right away, something you can turn to any page and read. It's not full of boring chapters. It's just something you can pick up and understand and say, oh, this is the value I get when I read. So maybe now I'll read a more complex book or an in-depth book, or I can jump into something else. And that's kind of why I decided to write that book, is to help people understand that you have to keep learning or you're going to not be able to progress.
Lots of good stuff there. I really like how you focused on keeping in touch with the clients that you've sold. It's, when we talk about relationships, one thing that you're really going to benefit from is that ability to work with people all over, the world throughout the course of a career, right? And staying in touch with those folks is going to be impactful for your career, because you never know where they're going to go, where they may be able to pull you. That's why you invest in those relationships. I look at relationships like a stock portfolio to some degree, because you've got to invest in each one. With a customer, same example, being able to find ways to stay in touch and continue to add value, whether it's, maybe you send them a newsletter, or maybe you invite them to events and things of that stature, or you're connected with them on social and you drop them a line from time to time. Those types of things are continued investments. I cannot tell you how many times a senior executive at an organization that I supported went to another company, and guess what? They did business with me there too. And if you invest in those relationships, it's like the dividends that are paid are continued business, continued relationships. And that's why I think those things are so important. The fundamentals are key. And like you said, they never change. People and process. Find the right people. As a sales leader, you find the right people, you get the right process going, and that process will change because the tools look different, the variables look different, the playing field looks different. All the fundamentals, though, are at the core of what we do, and that is what has made sales hum forever. I love, too, how you highlighted books. And I'm a firm believer too that you don't have to read as a seller. You don't have to read all sales books. Like I see posts that also are mixed on, hey, they love reading their sales books. Great. They love listening to sales podcasts. Great. Or I don't want to read about sales. Maybe I want to read nonfiction to totally free my mind or take my mind off the grind. Any of those things are key. I'd like to hear more about your journey on your book, Mareo. And the reason why is because, I talk to a lot of people that have written books, written sales books. Everybody has a driving force behind it. I like your motivation and that you wanted to write something that would be kind of an easy button for people to just kind of slide into, not long, cumbersome chapters to plow through. What was kind of the driving force, and what are you hoping to get out of it?
That's a good question. So I guess when I started really studying and taking that sales was going to be my craft and that was going to be my career, I started really studying and started reading tons of stuff. And then I would take notes on what I read. And so over the years, I've compiled tons of notebooks and tons of electronic documents of the notes that I took. So putting together that was kind of the main, how I kind of put it together. Why I did it, though, was all the time people would say, hey, since you've read the books, what should I do in this situation? They would just try to ask me questions so they wouldn't have to read the book. And that's fine, right? But they would just ask me, hey, what should I do here? What's the best book to read about this situation? So I just give them my list. And so because of that, I started actually producing book lists of books that I've read that I want to share with people and stuff, because people were asking me, right? And I guess the motivation to do it just became, I have all this information that putting it all together in one place isn't going to be easy for most people. And of the sales books I read, they're all very, very good and motivational. But I want to put something together that if I was beginning in sales and this was my first book I read, this would be the first book that should be read. And that was my initial motivation. But then after doing it, lots of people who have read the advanced copy, because it doesn't come out till next month, said, hey, I'm not in sales, but I really like this book. So I think it can help people no matter their situation. But the main idea was put a bunch of information that you have to collect in lots of places and just make it as an easy resource for people.
I love that because, well, first off, it's kind of like a Cliff's Notes version.
Yeah.
People were requesting you to serve that role for them. It shows that people want that information, but they want to read it in a relatable or easy kind of way. And I like that because I would say, when leading teams, or even when I was just starting out with a new book of business, it's all about getting that lay of the land. And nothing better than understanding all the resources resources at your disposal. One of the things that I built out historically for myself or for my extended team or even teams that I've led is let's kind of put a grid in place and understand what's the relationship heat map look like. But then to your point, what are those resources and where do I go to get them? Because you will find over time, and I think this is a key learning for sellers. I learned this by doing. I would look back on maybe a year and say, what could I have maybe done better? How could I set myself for this next year up better than I did last year? And I kept coming back to some of the same stuff. Like, man, I spent a lot of time maybe hunting and pecking for certain resources or, favorites that I could have, things I could have saved to favorites or documents or, just things that I needed kind of in a pitch binder. Let me get all that stuff culminated, and then I can have it as a quick reference. So I love that you said that. The other thing that I would encourage a lot of sellers to do is exactly what you said. Create a journal of some kind. And it doesn't have to be cumbersome. I think a lot of times when you say to somebody like, hey, create a journal, they're thinking, oh my God, I got to write like a daily passage that's, paragraphs long. Not so. Some days I'll make like one line of like a bullet, just a bullet point item that is something that happened that day or a key learning, some type of experience, something that I might have contributed that drove impact or an outcome with a client or with my team or with other people that I get to interact with. And the reason for that is manyfold. When you look back and, we're in a day and age where a lot of us have a hand in writing our own appraisals, or we're always going to be conveying what we do, what value we bring to the business, to our superiors, to other people that we come in contact with. Let's say you're interviewing for another role, whatever it is. To be able to look back on that journal and articulate, these milestones along the way or these key learnings, I think that's super powerful. So I would encourage, I love what you said about just kind of logging these thoughts, these notes, these nuggets that you pick up from all over the place. That is a non-negotiable for me too. Awesome. We've got a few minutes left. Would love to do, maybe one last question of anything that you want to highlight on. So this could be kind of our last segment. So anything else that you want to hit on before we would sign off?
Well, yeah. So the idea behind what I wrote was that the people that care the most are going to sell the most. And that's been proven in every industry I've been in, no matter what their skill level is, their education, their knowledge, their experience. The ones who care the most, and you can tell care by how they act, their actions, their intent, everything combined, they always sell the most. That's the final denominator. And so I think if you can learn how to care about the right things and care about the people you're serving, you're going to find the results. Might not be the same way every time. And eventually you'll create the processes you need to be successful for yourself. But if you care the most, you'll figure it out.
That is a phenomenal motto. People that care the most sell the most. And I think that's why it's incumbent upon all of us to care about what others care about, finding out obviously what customers care about. How do we figure out what looks like a win to them? All the people that we touch, other people that maybe team selling approaches, who else is on my selling team? I got to care about how they get paid. I got to care about what makes them tick. And then also as a sales leader, I've got to understand the why of everybody on my team. Why are they here? Why are they motivated to work? Are they motivated to work? Are they wanting to feed their family, or do they want to be the CEO of the company? And I think understanding those motivations, removing legitimate barriers to that success so that they have a clearer path to victory, those are the things that matter. I loved how you kind of encompassed everything by saying that around caring, because at the end of it, if you care about selling, you care about there's a number next to my name and I want it to be indicative of how good I am or how, my effort. And then if you care about outcomes for your customers and all the people you interact with, you can go very, very far.
Yeah, I agree.